All right, so we've got a really interesting topic in front of us today. All this stuff about managing those, menopause symptoms,
Yeah,
some natural remedies, some stuff about hormones. Lots to unpack.
absolutely. And, there's just so much information out there
Right.
about this topic. So I think it's a great idea to do a deep dive and really break it down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's
What?
So we've got a bunch of sources all sent in from you guys out there. So
Mm-hmm.
let's see what we can learn today.
Yeah, let's dig in.
Okay. So first up, let's talk about all those herbal remedies you see, everywhere these
It's
days.
everywhere.
Like you walk into any health shop and there's a whole section dedicated to it,
Absolutely.
all promising, natural relief from hot flushes and everything else.
Right.
But one thing that really jumped out from the stuff you sent is that these products, they don't actually go through the same
Right.
kind of rigorous testing as like conventional medicines,
Yeah.
like HRT, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't realize. We're so used to seeing,
Yeah.
medications in the pharmacy and
Yeah.
assuming that they've been through all these checks and balances.
Right.
But with a lot of these herbal supplements, that's not necessarily the case. So,
Yeah.
it really begs the question, how do we know if they're actually safe?
Yeah, exactly.
If they're effective and if the quality is consistent from batch to batch?
Right. And we're talking about quite a list here.
Oh, yeah.
We've got evening primrose oil, black cohosh, angelica ginseng,
Mm-hmm.
St. John's wort, red clover. I mean, it just goes on and on.
It's a long list.
It does, yeah. And they
Yeah.
all have these like proposed mechanisms of action, like red clover, for example.
Right.
It supposedly has these plant compounds that mimic estrogen.
Yes.
And then you've got black cohosh, which is thought to help kind of balance out
Yeah.
estrogen and progesterone.
Yeah.
But how much of that is actually backed up by, solid science?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's often this assumption that because something is plant-derived,
Mm-hmm.
it's automatically going to have some sort of beneficial effect on our hormones. And, while it's true that plant compounds can definitely interact with our bodies,
Yeah.
the scientific evidence to say that these specific herbs actually alleviate menopause symptoms, it's pretty weak.
Yeah.
You might hear anecdotal stories from people saying, oh, this really helped me. But
Right.
when you look at the large-scale studies, the kind of studies that are done for medications,
Yeah.
the results just aren't that convincing.
So it's not necessarily that these natural options are bad. It's just that we don't really know
Exactly.
for sure if they really work.
We don't have that level of certainty that we do with some other treatments.
Okay, so that's effectiveness. But
Mhm.
then there's also the question of dosage.
Right.
If these things aren't regulated, how do you know how much to take?
Yeah. And that's a huge concern. Without standardized dosages based on proper research, it's really a guessing game.
Right. And on top of that, the quality of these products can vary so much.
Yeah.
You can buy 2 bottles of the same thing and get completely different doses.
Okay. So that's a bit scary.
It is a bit, yeah.
And then even if you do find something that seems to help, how long does that relief actually last?
Yeah, that's another big unknown with a lot of these remedies. They haven't been studied long term,
Yeah.
so we don't really know if the benefits are sustainable.
And this brings us to something really important that I think we need to talk about, which is
Yes.
side effects.
Yeah,
Because even if something's natural, it doesn't mean it's automatically safe.
absolutely not.
Right. And one of the sources you sent specifically flagged St. John's wort as having the potential to
Yeah.
really mess with other medications.
It can. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's a really important point to emphasize,
Mhm.
Just because something has a natural label on it doesn't mean it can't have serious interactions with other drugs.
Right. So someone might be taking St. John's wort thinking, oh, it's natural, it's harmless, but
It could actually be making their other medication less effective or even causing
kind of
dangerous side effects.
That's right. And St. John's wort is a prime example of that. It affects how your body processes certain medications. So
Yeah.
it can really throw things out of whack.
And it's not even just about interactions with prescribed medications, right?
No, that's right.
What about the quality of these herbal products themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, how do we know that what's on the label is actually what's in the bottle?
Yeah, you make a great point there because the manufacturing process isn't as tightly controlled as it is for pharmaceuticals.
Right.
You can have huge variations in the active ingredients, the concentration, and even contaminants.
So essentially, you could be taking something completely different to what you think you're taking.
Potentially. Yeah, and that's a worrying thought.
It is. So, I mean, based on all of this, the advice to talk to your doctor or a pharmacist before trying
Mm-hmm.
any of these complementary therapies, I mean, that seems like a no-brainer.
It's absolutely crucial. They can look at your individual situation,
Yeah.
consider your medical history, any other medications you're taking,
Right.
and help you weigh up the potential benefits and risks.
Okay, so that's herbal remedies.
Mm.
Now let's move on to another topic that you sent in a lot of information about, which is bioidentical hormones.
Oh.
So from what I understand, these are hormones that are made from plant sources,
Mm.
and they're often marketed as being very similar
Right.
to the hormones that our bodies naturally produce.
Yes.
And the implication seems to be that this makes them a more natural and therefore safer alternative to conventional HRT.
Right, and that word natural gets thrown around a lot in this area, but it's important to dig a bit deeper.
Okay.
Because while bioidentical hormones might sound appealing on the surface, the reality is that they
Yeah.
often lack the kind of rigorous testing and regulation that we see with other hormone therapies.
So it's a similar issue to the herbal remedies in a way.
Exactly. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
often that same lack of oversight.
All right.
So how do we know for sure that they're safe, effective,
Yeah.
and that the quality is consistent?
And one of your sources specifically mentioned that this idea of basing your hormone treatment on saliva tests,
Yeah.
that's not actually supported by strong scientific evidence.
It isn't. No, hormone levels in saliva, they don't necessarily reflect what's going on in your bloodstream or in the tissues where those hormones are actually acting.
Right, so relying on saliva tests to guide hormone therapy that could lead to you getting the wrong treatment.
Exactly. It's not a reliable way to determine what your body actually needs.
Okay, so we've talked about bioidentical hormones, but then there's also this other term, body identical hormones.
Yes.
And it seems like these two terms are often used interchangeably, but they actually mean very different things.
They do. Yeah, and this is where it can get a bit confusing.
Right.
So body identical hormones, they're also chemically identical to the hormones your body produces,
Yeah.
but the key difference is that they are regulated. They've gone through rigorous testing, and there's a lot of research behind their use, so healthcare professionals can confidently prescribe them.
Right, so they're essentially the same thing chemically, but it's that regulatory aspect and the research backing that makes all the difference.
Exactly, and that's really what gives us that reassurance of safety and effectiveness.
So even though the word natural is used a lot in this whole area, it sounds like many standard HRT hormones are actually derived from natural sources too.
That's right, a lot of them are. But the key difference is that they've been through rigorous testing and regulation to ensure that they're both safe and effective.
So it's not about where the substance comes from. It's about...
It's about the science behind it.
Exactly.
It's about having that evidence base to support its use.
Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit now and talk about this bigger picture of hormonal imbalance in women's health.
Okay.
It's not just about menopause. It's about understanding that our hormone levels naturally fluctuate throughout our lives.
Absolutely. Our hormones are constantly adjusting in response to different things like our menstrual cycle, pregnancy,
Yeah.
aging, stress levels.
It's a complex system.
It really is, yeah. And these fluctuations are perfectly normal, but they can sometimes lead to various symptoms.
Right, and being aware of those symptoms can help us to understand our bodies better and know when we might need to seek help.
Exactly. It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge and taking proactive steps to manage our health.
And I think it's fair to say that most women are going to experience some kind of hormonal changes
Yeah,
throughout their lives, whether it's related to their periods, pregnancy, menopause, or other factors.
absolutely. It's a
Right.
normal part of being a woman.
So it makes sense that we'd be looking for ways to manage those changes, whether through conventional medicine or complementary therapies.
And there's no one-size-fits-all approach, right? What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. So it's all about finding what works best for you as an individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where having open communication with your doctor or other healthcare professionals is so important.
They can really help you navigate all of this.
They can, yeah, and put together a plan that's tailored to your specific needs.
All right, so to sum up what we've learned today, it seems like the key takeaway is
Yeah.
that there's these two main categories of options when it comes to managing menopause symptoms.
Okay.
You've got the herbal remedies and the unregulated bioidentical hormones where the evidence is often lacking and the quality can be inconsistent.
Right.
And then you've got the regulated body identical hormones used in standard HRT, which have a much stronger scientific foundation.
Exactly. And I think it's so important to understand that difference.
Yeah. And to remember that your doctor is your best resource for navigating all of this.
Absolutely.
They can give you personalized advice and help you make informed decisions about your health.
Couldn't agree more.
So as you continue to explore this topic and learn more about women's health, remember to be critical of the information you come across. Look for reliable sources, and don't hesitate to have those conversations with your healthcare providers.
It's about taking control of your health and making choices that are right for you.
Exactly. So before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I think maybe just one final thought, as you're considering all these different options and weighing up the pros and cons.
Hmm.
Maybe the most empowering question to ask yourself isn't just, is it natural?
Yeah,
But what does the best available evidence show?
I like that.
And what is the safest and most effective option for me personally?
That's a great takeaway.
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
you're welcome.
All right, that's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us,
Thanks for having me.
and we'll see you next time.
Bye.